The Galactic Combat Summit was supposed to be a celebration of power. Representatives from hundreds of civilizations filled the colossal amphitheater on Vathar, a neutral world built specifically for interstellar diplomacy. Warriors, admirals, scientists, and politicians occupied tier after tier of floating platforms that circled the central arena. Every species had come to display what made them formidable. Some showcased advanced weapons capable of destroying moons. Others presented biological enhancements, combat drones, or centuries-old martial traditions. It was a gathering where strength was admired above almost everything else. And humanity barely attracted attention. Earth had joined the wider galaxy only a few decades earlier. Compared to ancient stellar empires that measured their history in tens of thousands of years, humans were newcomers. Their technology was respectable but not revolutionary. Their military was competent but not dominant. To most alien observers, humanity occupied a forgettable middle ground. Useful. Harmless. Unremarkable. That perception suited Commander Elena Reyes just fine. Standing among the diplomatic delegates, she watched the demonstrations without speaking. Her dark uniform bore the insignia of Earth's defense fleet, though few in attendance recognized it. She carried no ceremonial weapon, wore no medals, and made no effort to draw attention to herself. Elena preferred observation over conversation. While other representatives boasted about military victories and territorial expansions, she listened. Years of service had taught her that arrogance revealed more weaknesses than confidence ever could. The loudest voice in the arena belonged to a warrior named Kroth Vorn. Even among his own species, he was enormous. The Vargans were already known for their size and physical dominance. Kroth stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dense muscle beneath dark armored plating. Scars crossed his face and neck, trophies from battles fought across multiple sectors. His reputation preceded him everywhere. He had defeated champions from dozens of civilizations. He had survived conflicts that became military case studies. Entire worlds celebrated his victories. As Kroth entered the arena, thousands erupted into applause. He accepted the admiration as naturally as breathing. A demonstration platform rose from the center floor carrying an enormous weapon forged from polished black metal. The object resembled a hybrid between a hammer and a staff, thick enough that most species would struggle to wrap both hands around its handle. Kroth lifted it effortlessly. The crowd responded with approving cheers. With a single swing, he shattered a reinforced alloy block positioned nearby. Fragments exploded across the platform. More applause followed. Kroth smiled. Then his eyes drifted toward the delegation section. Toward Elena. At first, she thought nothing of it. Then he laughed. The sound boomed through the arena. Interesting, he said, pointing directly at her. The humans sent that? Several nearby delegates turned. Elena remained expressionless. Kroth stepped forward. I expected a soldier. A few spectators chuckled. The Vargan continued. Perhaps Earth misunderstood the invitation. This summit is for military powers. Laughter spread through the surrounding tiers. Elena offered no reaction. That only encouraged him. I've studied your species, Kroth announced. Short lifespans. Fragile bodies. Limited natural weapons. Frankly, I'm impressed humans managed to leave their homeworld at all. The audience laughed harder. Some delegates exchanged amused glances. Others simply watched. Public humiliation was not uncommon at gatherings where pride and competition mixed freely. Still, Elena's expression never changed. Kroth frowned slightly. He had expected anger. Embarrassment. Anything. Instead, she looked almost bored. Determined to provoke a response, he lifted the massive weapon and held it high above his head. This weighs more than most humans. The crowd erupted again. Then, without warning, he tossed the weapon off the platform. Gasps echoed through the arena as the massive object crashed onto the floor directly in front of Elena. The impact shook nearby seats. Metal groaned. Dust scattered. Croth folded his arms. A grin spread across his face. Go ahead, human. Silence slowly replaced the laughter. Lift it. Thousands of eyes shifted toward Elena. The challenge hung in the air. Most spectators expected refusal. Others anticipated failure. Croth clearly expected both. For the first time, Elena looked down at the weapon resting before her. Then she calmly stepped forward and wrapped one hand around the handle. The arena became completely silent. The weapon rose from the floor. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Elena simply lifted it as though its weight was an inconvenience rather than a challenge. A murmur swept through the arena. The massive black metal staff had been designed for Vargon physiology. Many species present couldn't have moved it without mechanical assistance. Yet the human commander held it steadily with one arm before shifting it into both hands. No strain appeared on her face. No triumphant smile. Nothing. She examined the weapon for a moment, then walked several steps forward and offered it back. Croth accepted it automatically. For the first time that day, uncertainty flashed across his features. The moment passed quickly. His pride found an explanation. Lucky leverage, he declared loudly. Some audience members nodded. Others seemed less convinced. Elena returned to her position without comment. The silence bothered Croth more than any insult could have. He had built a career on dominating opponents. Their reactions fed his reputation. Fear, anger, humiliation, those emotions reinforced the image he projected across the galaxy. The human gave him none of them. Meanwhile, several spectators began accessing data networks. Questions spread through private channels. How had she done it? Had the weapon's weight been exaggerated? Were humans stronger than official records suggested? Within minutes, analysts from multiple worlds started reviewing information that most had ignored for years. Humanity had never been considered important enough to study deeply. That assumption suddenly looked careless. One researcher from the Keth Science Directorate projected Earth's environmental statistics onto a shared display. The numbers immediately attracted attention. Is this accurate? He asked. A colleague verified the figures. The answer surprised everyone nearby. Earth possessed significantly higher surface gravity than many inhabited worlds. Not extreme enough to prevent colonization. High enough to influence evolution. Species raised in lower gravity environments often developed lighter frames and more efficient movement. Humans had evolved under heavier conditions from the beginning. Every step they took. Every object they carried. Every structure they built. Their bodies had adapted accordingly. The discussion expanded. Another analyst examined historical records. What he found only deepened the mystery. Human civilization contained an endless sequence of survival stories. They crossed frozen continents without advanced technology. They sailed across dangerous oceans before reaching spaceflight. They settled deserts, mountains, jungles, and polar regions. When faced with hostile conditions, they rarely retreated permanently. Instead, they adapted. Again and again. A military strategist reviewing Earth history shook his head. These records cannot be correct. What part? All of it. Conflicts spanning centuries. Nations rising and falling. Technological revolutions occurring within remarkably short periods. Disasters followed by reconstruction. Failures followed by innovation. Humanity seemed trapped in a constant cycle of challenge and response. A species that learned through pressure. A species shaped by adversity. The more experts investigated, the more one conclusion emerged. The galaxy had mistaken familiarity for understanding. Humans looked ordinary. That had encouraged everyone to stop looking deeper. Croth remained unaware of the growing conversations. He was focused entirely on Elena. The applause from earlier demonstrations had faded. Attention had shifted away from his accomplishments and toward questions he couldn't answer. That irritated him. You believe lifting a weapon proves something? He called out. Elena glanced toward him. It proves I can lift a weapon. A few spectators laughed. This time they weren't laughing with Croth. The Vargan's jaw tightened. Strength is demonstrated through action. Agreed. Then demonstrate yours. The challenge echoed through the arena. Now the audience leaned forward. Not because they expected violence. Because they sensed something changing. For decades, humanity had occupied the background of galactic affairs. Today, for the first time, countless civilizations were paying attention. Elena studied Croth for several seconds. She understood exactly what was happening. This was no longer about a personal insult. The warrior represented every assumption the galaxy had made about her species. Weak. Average. Insignificant. The easiest way to preserve those assumptions was to walk away. The easiest way to destroy them was to accept. Finally, she nodded once. The response triggered immediate reactions throughout the amphitheater. Observers activated recording systems. News agencies redirected coverage. Commentators interrupted scheduled broadcasts. Millions of viewers across known space began tuning in. Croth smiled, believing he had regained control of the situation. He hadn't. Because while he thought he was challenging a single human, he was actually confronting a truth the galaxy had overlooked for generations. Humanity's greatest strength had never been its appearance. It was the fact that almost everyone underestimated it until it was far too late. And now, with the eyes of countless worlds fixed upon the arena, Elena Reyes stepped forward to correct that mistake. The announcement spread across interstellar networks faster than anyone expected. What had begun as a careless insult was now the most watched event of the summit. Observers flooded communication channels. Military academies requested live access. Research institutions opened dedicated feeds. Even governments that normally ignored ceremonial gatherings started paying attention. A human had accepted a challenge from Croth Vorn. That fact alone was enough to attract interest. The challenge itself made it impossible to ignore. A circular platform rose from the arena floor while officials prepared the demonstration area. Security barriers activated around the perimeter. Spectators shifted closer to viewing positions as anticipation built throughout the structure. Croth stood proudly at the center. His confidence had returned. He believed the earlier incident had been a misunderstanding. A moment of surprise. Nothing more. Soon, he intended to remind everyone why his name inspired respect across dozens of systems. A transport team brought forward a reinforced containment cradle. Inside rested the black metal weapon. The crowd immediately recognized it. Conversations erupted. The artifact was known throughout Vargon space. It wasn't merely military equipment. It was a symbol. For generations, champions of the Dominion had carried similar weapons into battle. Their construction process remained one of the most closely guarded secrets in Vargon history. The alloy itself was legendary. Dense. Durable. Extremely resistant to deformation. Stories claimed the metal could survive direct impacts that would destroy conventional materials. Whether every story was true hardly mattered. Its reputation was enough. Croth placed one hand on the weapon. Pride of the Dominion, he declared. His voice echoed throughout the arena. This artifact has endured centuries of warfare. He lifted it high overhead. Many have tested themselves against it. A smile crossed his face. None have altered it. Cheers erupted from Vargon spectators. Croth lowered the weapon and motioned towards several reinforced alloy blocks positioned nearby. With a powerful swing, he struck the first target. The block split apart. A second strike shattered another. Metal fragments scattered across the platform. The audience roared approval. The display was impressive. Even Elena acknowledged that. Croth rested the weapon against one shoulder and looked directly at her. Your turn. The arena quieted. Elena stepped forward. No dramatic entrance. No speech. No attempt to entertain the audience. She approached the artifact with the same focus she might give a technical problem. That alone puzzled many observers. Most competitors facing Croth would have tried matching his aggression. Elena ignored the performance entirely. She crouched slightly beside the weapon. Her eyes moved across its surface. Studying. Examining. Analyzing. Several engineers watching remotely leaned forward. One of them noticed something unusual. She's inspecting stress patterns. Another nodded. She's not measuring strength. Then what is she measuring? The answer came seconds later. Humans had survived for thousands of years by understanding how things worked. Machines. Structures. Materials. Nature itself. When confronted by an obstacle, they rarely relied on force alone. They searched for weaknesses. Patterns. Opportunities. Earth's history was filled with examples. Humans broke stronger opponents through strategy. Crossed impossible distances through persistence. Solved limitations through creativity. Adaptation had become instinct. Elena slowly rotated the weapon in her hands. The crowd watched every movement. Croth's confidence remained unshaken. He saw caution. He saw hesitation. What he failed to see was calculation. A small imperfection caught Elena's attention. Not damage. A structural compromise hidden beneath decorative reinforcement. An unavoidable consequence of how the artifact had been forged. Tiny. Almost invisible. Yet present. Her expression never changed. The audience waited. Seconds felt unusually long. Across hundreds of worlds, millions stared at screens. Commentators stopped talking. Predictions ceased. Even Croth found himself growing impatient. Well, he asked. Elena ignored the question. Instead, she adjusted her grip. One hand near the lower section. The other closer to the center. A position that seemed strange to most spectators. A position that made several engineers suddenly sit upright. Because they finally understood what she was doing. And if they were correct, the next few moments would change the entire conversation. Elena planted her feet firmly against the platform. Not preparing to overpower the weapon. Preparing to use it against itself. For the first time since the challenge began, uncertainty appeared in Croth's eyes. The human tightened her grip. The arena fell completely silent. Then she began to apply pressure. At first, nothing happened. The artifact remained perfectly straight. The audience stared, waiting for the obvious failure they expected to witness. Croth relaxed slightly. Whatever concern had appeared moments earlier began to fade. Then a sound echoed through the arena. A faint metallic creak. So quiet that many thought they had imagined it. Elena didn't stop. Her posture remained controlled. Every movement was deliberate. Pressure increased gradually rather than explosively. She wasn't fighting the metal. She was forcing stress into the exact location she had identified. The artifact resisted. For centuries it had endured impacts, collisions, and warfare. It had been built to survive violence. What it had never faced was someone who understood precisely where its strength became vulnerability. Another creak sounded. Louder this time. Conversations stopped instantly. Several engineers monitoring structural readings looked down at their displays in disbelief. Numbers began shifting. Material strain was increasing. The impossible was becoming measurable. Croth took a step forward. No. The word escaped before he could stop it. The weapon's centerline moved. Only slightly. A fraction of a degree. Yet everyone saw it. The artifact had bent. Gasps erupted throughout the arena. The reaction spread across every broadcast connected to the event. Commentators fell silent. Analysts stared at screens. Millions watched the same impossible image. The legendary Vargon weapon was deforming in human hands. Elena continued applying force. The bend became visible. A gentle curve formed along the central shaft. Metal groaned under pressure. The sound echoed throughout the structure like a warning. Krotha's expression transformed completely. The confidence that had defined him all day disappeared. For the first time, he looked genuinely stunned. "Stop," one Vargon delegate whispered. Another simply shook his head. No one moved. Nobody could. They were witnessing the collapse of an assumption that had existed for generations. Humanity wasn't supposed to be capable of this. Not physically. Not strategically. Not culturally. Yet the evidence stood directly before them. A species dismissed as ordinary had identified a flaw overlooked by everyone else. The curve deepened. Several sections of decorative reinforcement began separating from the main structure. The hidden weakness Elena had discovered was no longer hidden. It was being exposed before the entire galaxy. Kroth stared at the artifact as though reality itself had betrayed him. That weapon represented more than metal. It represented status. Tradition. Superiority. His entire challenge had been built around the belief that no human could threaten those things. Now they were folding in front of him. A sharp crack split the air. The sound thundered through the arena. Spectators flinched. The weapons suddenly bent much farther. Shock rippled across every level of the amphitheater. Some observers rose from their seats. Others simply froze. The artifact was no longer resisting. Its internal structure had begun failing. Elena adjusted her grip one final time. Then she pushed. The second crack was even louder. Metal ruptured. The shaft folded dramatically near its center. The legendary weapon hung twisted between her hands. For several seconds, absolute silence followed. No applause. No cheers. No shouting. Just stunned disbelief. Even automated broadcast systems struggled to process the moment. Elena looked down at the ruined artifact. Then she carefully lowered it onto the platform. She treated it with more respect after breaking it than Kroth had shown while mocking her. The contrast wasn't lost on the audience. Finally, sound returned. Not from the Vargans. From everyone else. Thousands erupted simultaneously. Shock. Excitement. Disbelief. The arena transformed into chaos. Kroth stood motionless. His eyes never left the damaged weapon. The warrior who had mocked humanity before an entire summit suddenly appeared smaller than ever. Not because his size had changed. Because certainty had abandoned him. Elena turned toward the crowd. She waited patiently until the noise subsided. When she finally spoke, her voice carried none of the triumph people expected. "I didn't break this because humans are the strongest species." The arena quieted. "I broke it because strength alone isn't enough." Every word landed with precision. Many civilizations spend centuries becoming powerful. She glanced at the folded artifact. Humans spent centuries learning. No one interrupted. When we encounter obstacles, we study them. When we fail, we adapt. When something appears impossible, we look closer. Her gaze moved across the audience. Most species ask whether a barrier can be overcome. A brief pause followed. Humans ask how. Silence returned. This time it wasn't disbelief. It was understanding. Because the shattered weapon on the platform represented more than a broken artifact. It represented a broken misconception. And for the first time, the galaxy was beginning to understand exactly what kind of species humanity had become. The summit ended, but the story refused to. Within hours, recordings of the challenge had reached every major communication network in known space. The footage was replayed endlessly. Analysts slowed it down frame by frame. Engineers examined the artifact's failure point. Military experts debated Elena's method. None of them argued about whether it had happened. The evidence was undeniable. The discussion centered on a far more uncomfortable question. How had the galaxy misjudged humanity so badly? For generations, major powers had classified humans as a developing species with moderate capabilities and limited influence. Their reports emphasized fleet sizes, industrial output, and territorial reach. Those measurements suddenly seemed incomplete. The summit had revealed something statistics couldn't easily capture. Human beings approached problems differently. That realization spread quickly through military institutions. Strategists began reviewing historical encounters involving Earth. Patterns emerged. Whenever humans faced disadvantages, they compensated through adaptation. When resources were scarce, they improvised. When opponents possessed superior equipment, they altered tactics. When circumstances changed, they changed with them. Again and again, the same conclusion appeared. Humanity's greatest asset wasn't strength. It wasn't technology. It wasn't numbers. It was flexibility. Several governments commissioned entirely new assessments. Research teams expanded human studies programs. Academies added Earth case studies to officer training courses. A species once treated as an afterthought suddenly became required reading. Meanwhile, the image of the bent weapon continued spreading across the stars. Not because of the metal itself. Because of what it symbolized. People saw more than a damaged artifact. They saw certainty collapsing. They saw arrogance meeting reality. Most importantly, they saw a human succeeding without rage, threats, or violence. That detail fascinated observers. Elena hadn't humiliated Kroth. She had educated him. There was a difference. Several days after the summit, Kroth requested a private meeting. The invitation surprised many officials. It surprised Elena as well. Still, she accepted. When they met, the Vargon warrior looked different. Not weaker. Not defeated. Simply thoughtful. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Kroth broke the silence. I believed strength was simple. Elena waited. I thought power meant overcoming resistance. His gaze lowered briefly. The weapon represented that belief. You weren't alone, Elena replied. Kroth gave a short laugh. No. I suspect much of the galaxy agreed with me. Another pause followed. Then the warrior straightened. When I looked at humanity, I saw limits. And now? Now I see a species that treats limits as invitations. The admission carried weight. Not because it came from a defeated opponent. Because it came from someone willing to learn. Elena nodded. That was enough. No rivalry remained between them. Only understanding. Months passed. Then years. The incident never disappeared from public memory. Students studied it. Leaders referenced it. Military instructors used it to explain the danger of underestimating unfamiliar opponents. Over time, humanity's reputation transformed. Not into conquerors. Not into rulers. Something far more interesting. Problem solvers. Explorers. Builders. Survivors. A civilization that consistently found paths where others saw walls. Species across the galaxy began seeking partnerships with Earth. Scientific cooperation increased. Trade expanded. Joint research projects multiplied. Trust grew alongside respect. Humanity hadn't earned that respect through intimidation. It earned it through demonstration. The lesson proved remarkably difficult to forget. Eventually, a saying emerged among interstellar travelers. It spread from world to world until almost everyone had heard some version of it. Never underestimate a human. Not because they're the largest. Not because they're the fastest. Not because they're the strongest. Underestimate them because they appear ordinary. Then watch how quickly that mistake becomes expensive. Years later, visitors still traveled to Vadar. Not for the summit itself. For the artifact preserved inside the station's historical archive. The once pristine weapon remained permanently bent. No repairs were attempted. No restoration was authorized. The damage stayed visible by design. A reminder. Every civilization measured power according to its own standards. Some valued fleets. Some valued wealth. Some valued physical dominance. Humanity measured something else. Persistence. The willingness to learn. The refusal to accept impossibility without investigation. That mindset had carried humans across oceans, through disasters, beyond their homeworld, and eventually into the stars. The galaxy had spent decades asking whether humanity belonged among the great powers. After the summit, that question vanished forever. Because the answer wasn't hidden in military rankings or economic reports. It was resting inside a display case on Vadar. A bent weapon. A shattered assumption. And a lesson the galaxy would never forget.